Fantastic. Okay, so we're going to continue to develop a little bit more sensitivity in the cultivation of intelligence, not book smart, but intelligence in the body. So as you sit in whatever pose is most comfortable for you, notice the weight between your right sitting bone and your left sitting bone. And on a subtle level, this is setting the tone for how your spine extends up, albeit evenly or unevenly out of the pelvis. So if you feel uneven, what you can do is take your fists to the corner of the blankets and lift yourself up and then come back down, and your buttock flesh may even out so you feel more even on the blankets. Cross your forearms. If you're a little tight in the shoulders this morning, hold more of your wrists and slowly bring the elbows up as you press the buttock bones down. A nice deep breath in. And then begin to take your right elbow out to the right and go only in as much as you start to feel a little bit more stretch on the left side than the right. So you can feel the disparity between the length of the left side versus the shortening of the right side. Now, on your own, creativity-wise, how would you make the right side as long as the left side? All right. That's kind of like one of those things where they go off to a commercial and then they come back and give you the answer, right? So if I take my left ribs towards my right ribs and lift up through my armpit, I will even out. Right? So that's one trick. That's one way to resolve it. Right, and now take yourself all the way over with the left elbow. And this is a nice way to open up your shoulders as well. And if you feel a little jammed up in your shoulder, you can take the armpit back to reposition your arm and go over in as much as you start to feel just the slightest difference between the length on the right side body and the left side body. And then see what else you could possibly do to level out the ribs. If you just want to stick with taking the right ribs towards the left ribs and lift up to the armpit, go ahead and do so. But what I'm going to attempt to do is ground the left buttock bone and lift up and out through the left arm. So that's another way to do it. I still find the more powerful method is the ribs over towards one side. So in other words, these ribs over towards this side and then lift them up towards the armpit. That's the easiest route. And then center your elbows and shimmy the arms up. Lengthen your arms up fully. Turn the palms towards the screen. And if you still feel tight in the shoulders or you cannot straighten the arms, take your arms a little wider, maybe let the arms settle down. Now, if your neck is tight, just let this chin drop towards the sternum. Take 3 long, deep breaths in, and then exhale your arms out and down. Good. Maybe a little snap, crackle, pop. You need to shrug your shoulders. And now reverse the cross of your legs and notice if that creates a slight tilt in your pelvis, because the reverse cross is where I notice most of the differences. So now I feel like I'm tilting this way in my pelvis. And what that does is it ends up shortening on this side of my spine. So I'm going to lift again, right? Readjust. I feel a little bit more even. So if you start to notice the subtlety of imbalance, by noticing that right away and then correcting it, your poses, how you hold yourself in your body, even when you're off the mat, is going to build and continue to support you in having greater space, greater equity. And it's just, you know, it cultivates a greater sense of awareness and a greater sense of just caring and empowering yourself and being more, how should we say, in the pose that enlivens and opens and strengthens rather than something where you're just resigned, right? It's like getting into a car with a very heavy coat in the back seat when there's 4 people across the bench seat instead of just 2. How does that feel? And when you do that, What's your mindset? Not terribly uplifted. Right? This feels much better than this. So now we're going to go into Baddha Konasana. I would suggest strongly coming off of your blankets and abandoning one of those blankets off to the side and then coming back on, because we're going to work with Baddha Konasana and Upavishta Konasana. Now, Baddha Konasana is helpful for opening up some of this pelvic tilt. I'm going to turn 45 degrees so you can see a little bit better. So in all cases, if your feet are too close to the blanket, you're going to turn under and collapse in the front chest. So we want evenness between the front body and the back body. Take your feet a little further away and your hands back behind. You can knuckle if you wish to, because you get a little bit more power. Take your back waist forward so you roll onto the front aspect of your buttock bones. If you're not on the front aspect of your buttock bones, by all means, bring your feet a little further away. So let it be easy, because we want to be able to feel the play and the movement so you can adjust. In this posture, it's pretty easy to know that you're equally extending up through the side ribs from your outer hips. What's more difficult to find is the equal extension of the front body versus the back body. Reach the inner elbows back, descend the buttock bones down, reach the inner thighs away as you press the outer edges of the feet towards one another. Right? Now, sometimes we're not sure what that action is. So if you take your hands to your kneecaps and reach out, or you take your fingers back behind the knees and pull that crease away, because that usually works better if your knees are up pretty high. You can pull the fingers, just tuck them in the back of the knees and pull them away, or your hands are right on the kneecap and you reach out. Now slide your hands down to the front shins, and if you have a little bit more space to come forward, come forward. But again, you want to use that scoop of the abdomen in and up and out towards the sternum to keep you lifting up and forward rather than down and forward. Of course, some of us might just still be back here lengthening. So if it's still really tight and you're collapsing in the front, you may want to be back here to even out the lift to the front and the back. So find equity, find the evenness. And then bring yourself back up, lifting the knees up, extend your legs out in Dandasana. So the knees, the inner knee bones merge, the big toe mounds merge. Your heels may or may not touch. It just depends on the architecture of your frame, right? So as you look at the inner and outer heels, right, the line of the ball mounds of the feet are going to indicate primarily whether you have your inner and outer heels reaching evenly. Notice how the knees are going straight up. Make sure that's happening for you. And then take your feet wide. Upavishta Konasana. As you stretch the arms back and you roll forward and off of your blanket to any extent that the thighs are now firmly planted in the floor. If it's too much of a pull in your inner thighs, come back up on the blanket. If it's pulling on the inner knees, bring your feet a little closer together. And then if you can stay upright, shoulders over hips and be on the buttock bone, the front edge of the buttock bone, ground the palms of your hands down. If you need to lean back to get that equanimity of the lift of your front chest, keep your hands behind. And make sure that the hands are slightly, or the width of your shoulders, and you're not pinching the shoulder blades together. Upavishta Konasana. Now look at your legs. Make sure they still have that Dandasana quality. Now, if you start to come forward, the thighs need to roll back. And you might ask me, well, why? If you don't roll your thighs back, All right, so inhale, come up. So let's play, because sometimes it's like, well, that's good. So try this on. If you come forward, what's the tendency? Tendency is for my feet and my knees to roll forward with me, right? Unless you're super flexible. So come back up. Notice the weight in the back of your heel when your knees, heels, toes are all up. So you can notice at what point the weight starts to shift towards the inner heel without even looking at your foot and start to roll the inner thigh back. And that's your tell. That's when you know you need to adjust the leg. You can slide your arms out if you feel as though you're definitely bent and compressing in the armpit region. Firm the thighs, reach to the heels, lift your chest. Take a nice deep breath in. Yeah, definitely oxygenate if you're yawning. Deeper breaths. And then inhale in, come back up. Lift the knees, Baddha Konasana. Maybe you can now come a little closer to your blanket because you stretched in Upavishta Konasana and Baddha Konasana before. If you need your hands behind, take your hands behind. Reach the inner knees out. Extend up through the sternum. Side ribs forward and up. And if you reach back through the arms and take your back waist forward, you might feel that forward rotation in the pelvis. Now, enlivening the whole posture. That's another interesting proposition. So when you first come into the pose, where do you feel it the most? Right now, I feel it right here. And I feel a lot of pressure on the outer edges of my feet. I also feel a big stretch on the back left quadrant in here, because that's kind of my sensitive area in my back. So how can I enliven the areas that I don't feel any sensation? So since my legs and my lower back are already alive, what do I need to do? I need to bring some action into my trunk. So I'm going to lift up through the side ribs. So bring some action into the areas that are sleeping still. Now we can overstretch and we can understretch. So in the Yoga Sutras, there's only a few Yoga Sutras that talk about how do we actually practice the posture. They don't describe any of the postures at all. It's one of the oldest texts, and some people say it's just an outline for a Dharma talk, if you will. You know, many people have done interpretations on these sutras. Sthira Sukham Asana, right? Some of you have heard this many times. Sthira means firmness in the sense of, in combination with exhilaration, right? So there's this firm exhilaration. So if you feel like you're fighting your pose too much, it's not gonna work for you, right? Lean back, extend your legs out, Dandasana. Find the evenness of the reach of your heels, open up the back of the knees as you firm your thighs down, lift and open your chest. Sukha is softness, sweetness, ease, right? Like a nice cool breeze coming through the back door. Joyful, right? So we always want that balance between sthira and sukha. Asanam is posture, practicing the asana. Now take your feet wide into Upavishta Konasana again, right? Let yourself roll onto the front of the buttock bones, using the aid of the blanket beneath your buttock bones, the reach of your heels. Now we're going to take a little bit of a different tact here. Keep your head over the tailbone. Now, if you feel like you're fighting with staying upright, you may need to come back up onto your blanket. And we're going to turn to the right. So take your one arm in front, one arm back behind you. Keep the head over the tailbone. And as you bend your elbows, reaching away from the midline of the body, turn your trunk and keep reaching through that left thigh, plant it down. Now, when you feel the weight shift on the heels of the feet, you're going to need to correct the legs because we want the base to be steady and stable. Sthira. You want the abdomen to be soft. Sukha. Turn as much as you can, and then begin to bring your fingertips closer to the right leg and start to walk yourself out over the right leg, any amount. You may not be fully square over this right leg. That's okay. And then take your left hand to the top of the left thigh and roll it out. So you have a little leverage to turn more over that right leg. So focus more on the twist and less on the extension out over the leg. So you can scoop the abdomen in and up, spin the left thigh out, and reach out over that right leg. So you should get a nice lengthening on the left side of the back, a nice opening in the left hip, and interesting massaging of the abdominal region. Inhale and come back up. Extend both arms out, head over the tailbone. What do you feel? I feel a lot of stuff on the right, on this left side of my body. Right? Both hands, right arm forward, left hand back. And if you don't feel like you can bend your elbows and get some turn, you might have your hands too far out, so you can take them in. Exhale, reach through the elbows and start your turn. Firm the thighs down, inhale, lift your chest. Exhale, reach out through the elbows, turn. Let the sinews of the abdomen start to catch up with your intention. Has the weight shifted on your heels? Do you need to adjust? If you're not sure, you can always look at your feet to coordinate what's going on internally with what's going on externally. Bring your hands closer into the sides of the legs and begin to walk your hands out like little spiders. And notice what goes on. Is the weight in the left buttock bone the same as the right? Take your right hand and turn the right thigh outwards. Keep extending out. Inhale, lengthening up. Exhale, extending out over that left leg. So we're taking our time just to practice this idea of noticing the subtleties of the shift of weight in the heels, the shift of weight in the buttock bones, right? If you feel as though you can really take your hands out further along the side of your left leg, do so, but continue to keep that spin of the top of the right thigh. Inhale and come back up. Lift the back of the knees and sit in your Sukhasana once again. And even though you're down the blanket, you notice a better lift of your chest. Very good. Okay. So now we're coming onto our backs for a moment. Linda, we're not going to really do bridge pose now, so you can put a blanket beneath your head if you feel like you have too much space between your chin and your sternum. So what we're going to be doing now is wiper knees, the knee twist, Jatra Parvattanasana, and then Garudasana on the floor, eagle pose on the floor. Now you will probably then need maybe one block for your foot in eagle pose on the floor. I'm going to bring my mat up a little closer so you can see. Okay. Now, so make sure you have enough room that you can go from side to side with your knees. Now, the key to wiper knees is you make sure that your feet stay on the width of the mat, right? Because if they move over, you don't get quite the same expression. So if I let my knees fall out to the side, you can see here the inner edge of this foot that corresponds with the left side of your screen is on the inner, and the outside of my right foot is down, all right? And then I come over to this side. So that's the key with the feet. And I'm going to turn back where you can see a little bit more. So right now, what you want to do is just set yourself up where your feet, if you can, touch the back of your heels, lift the back of your pelvis and smooth the buttock flush towards the heels. And lie down with your arms out in a T position. So look left, look right, make sure your arms are coming straight out from the shoulders and you don't feel those shoulder blades coming up towards your ears. And then look left, look right, maybe get a nice stretch in your neck, and then find the center of the back of your head on the floor. Just give yourself a few breaths so that you feel your abdomen drop down. Now, let the knees drape over to the left. Reach out through your right thigh. Look over your right hand. So the knees go to the left, you look to the right. Reach out to the top of your right thigh. And you should begin to feel a really nice stretch on this whole front hip, front right thigh. So you're starting to open up the psoas a little bit here, right? If you feel any pinching in your lower back, keep scooping the abdomen in, right? If you're not getting enough stretch in your front right thigh, scoop the abdomen in. So as you breathe more deeply, see if you can even out your breath. On your next inhalation, bring the knees up. On your next exhalation, let the knees slowly drape over to the right. Reach out through the left knee. Scoop the abdomen in. Tailbone goes towards the midline of the body, towards the front of the body, and that'll help you with your scoop. Sternum towards the chin. Reach the left thigh away. Look over your left hand now for a full spinal twist. Inhale and come back up. And now go over to the left side again. Now, if your left foot is pretty close to your right knee, just hook your foot on top of your knee. And you get a little bit more assist in taking the right thigh out of the hip socket. Okay. Definitely is going to assist you in getting more space here. Again, if your feet have shifted closer together, you need to make them as wide as your mat. That's the one thing that I can say you have to keep an eye on. Unhook your foot. Make sure it's on the left side of your mat. Inhale, knees up. Exhale, knees over to the other side. And then hook your right foot on top of the left knee, drawing the knee and the thigh out and down. Look over your left hand. I'm looking at the screen. Keep an eye on you. So you turn. Reach through that left arm. Reach through the left thigh. Good. And then release. Unhook your foot from the knee. Come back up. And then center your hips if they move. Draw your knees towards your chest and gently massage your lower back wherever it feels a little stiff. So if you are more mid-back, take your knees close to your chest. If you're lower towards the sacrum, you want to take your knees away from your chest. Now, bring your feet to the floor. Stretch your arms out into a T. All right, as beginners, we may not have the ability to hop our hips to the right side of the mat. So just pretend that you are a beginner and walk your feet to the right side of the mat and lift your hips and take it down to the right side of the mat. So we're just going to play beginner's mind. Inhale, bring your knees up to your chest. Exhale, turn the knees to the left. So you're on the outer hip and let your knees fall to the floor. Okay. Let them fall to the floor. Now, bring your knees to stack on top of one another, your big toe mounts to stack on top of one another. And take your navel to the spine, turn your ribs, and reach to your right arm, look over your right hand. Now, if it's too much for your right shoulder, just bring your right hand to your right hip. All right? Now, stretch your right arm back out. Inhale the knees towards the chest and come back. Put your feet on the ground. Lift your hips, bring your hips to the center, walk your feet now all the way over to the left side. Lift your hips, take your hips to the left side of your mat. Inhale your knees towards your chest. And then exhale, roll all the way onto the outer edge of your right hip and let your knees come all the way to the floor. Stack your knees, stack your feet, reach for your left arm. Good, and look over your left hand. Take the navel towards the spine, scoop the abdomen in. Right? Inhale, bring your knees back up, feet on the floor. Bring your feet back to center line, hips back to center line. Right? Now, watch here. So if you're a little bit more adept at floating around with your hips, all right, there's a way to just shimmy the hips over to the right side and keeping the knees and the feet together. You rotate and let your knees float above the floor, right? So some of this comes from being able to sweep your legs up and over into plow pose. So if you find strain in your lower back, you let your knees come to the floor. Otherwise, you float. So let's see if we can do this. If not, all right, you can just go back into the same way. So right now, if you inhale and sweep the legs up toward your head, shift the hips to the right side of your mat, and take your knees over to the left elbow. Navel in, stretch your arms, take your gaze over your right hand. So if your knees are going to the left, you're looking over to the right. So your hips have to sweep to the right side of the mat, and your knees go left. Inhale, bring your knees back up, and then sweep or hop your hips over to the left, knees in to the chest. Exhale, knees to your right elbow, look over your left. Spread the toes, navel in and up towards the sternum, stretch those arms, look over your left hand. Inhale, bring your knees back up, and bring your hips to the center, feet to the floor. Stretch your arms overhead. Extend your right leg all the way up, and then reach it out along the floor. Bend both knees, take your left leg straight up, and lengthen it out along the floor. Good. All right. So now, Garudasana on the floor looks like this. All right, you cross a leg. You take your legs up, squeeze them together. If you're really adept at this, you're going to hook your foot underneath. All right, so you'll end up kind of like this, right? However, little difficult to maneuver, right? So one thing we can do is you sweep the knees over to one side and it merges. Here, I'll show you this way, all right? So I have to make sure I can see you guys. So I put a block under my head. All right, so if you have, just lie down. If you want to watch, you can watch. But if you have both knees together in the center of your mat, feet in the center, knees together. And now cross your right leg over your left. And if you bring your right knee a little closer to you and spin the back of your right thigh out to the right, you might get a little bit of the cross of the legs away from the knees. So it's a little lower down on that left leg. And now bring your knees over to the right. Do you feel how the shins potentially start to come together a little bit more? You feel how it stretches your outer left hip? Now, if you can, hook your foot behind, hook your right foot behind the left calf, if you can. If you can't, just squeeze the shins together, right? And now, what you want to do is take your arms up, bend the elbows, so your arms are going straight up towards the ceiling, bend the elbows, and now take your right elbow underneath the left, and wrap the hands around. Now bring your knees above your hips, your elbows above your shoulders. Now, as the knees go above the hips, you're going to have to draw the navel down. So your knees are straight up towards the ceiling. You're not twisting over to the side. Your knees are just straight up. So you can look here if you want to see. You're not turning. Yep. And if it's too intense, you just take your feet to the floor. Exhale and release. Uncross your arms, uncross your legs. So at most, you get a stretch on your outer hips and an abdominal work for the lower half of your body. Now, other side. Take your left leg up, cross it over the right. Take your knees over to your left. If you can, hook your foot around the back of the calf. All right. So leaving the feet on the floor is kind of easier, but it's up to you. Take your arms straight up. Bend the elbows. Take your left elbow underneath the right. Wrap the arms around. Keep the elbows directly up from the shoulders. Take your shins parallel to the floor, knees above the hips, navel down. Squeeze the legs, squeeze the forearms. That's it. You got it. I know it's crazy. And guess what? You're all muted, so you can scream. Not terribly yogic, but I guess it works. Now, if you breathe more deeply and find a way to take that navel down to the floor, maybe lifting your feet up a little bit sometimes helps. That's it, Amy. You got it. The deeper you breathe, the more fire you create, burning that samskara, that emotional baggage. You know, all these lovely terms, right? Exhale, bring your feet to the floor, uncross the arms, uncross the legs. And then what we can do now is just draw ellipses, make ellipses with the knees or little zigzags, whatever you want to do. And then eventually draw your right leg towards your chest, extend the left leg out along the floor. This is a very gentle psoas stretch. And have your left hand on your right knee and roll onto the outer edge of your left leg. So this is the last juicy twist on the floor. So have your left hand on your right knee and pull the right knee across the body and roll onto the outer edge of your left leg. So you want to be on your outer left hip and the hips are stacked. Inhale and come up. Keep your knee tight. Bring the left leg in, stretch the right leg out, reach firmly down into the floor with the right thigh. And then take your right hand to your outer left knee, bring it across the body, roll onto the outer edge of your right leg, stretch the left arm out. Now, are you still reaching through all 4 points? You could say 5 if you want to add your sternum of your body. Are you really extending evenly through the body? Is your breath even? Inhale, come back up. Both knees toward your chest, roll to your side and take child's pose. If your shoulders are still a little tight this morning for any reason, you can put a block beneath your forehead. If you're dealing with some sinus headache from the pollen, you can always put a block beneath your forehead as well. That's a nice grounding, draining element. The busy mind always loves having the breath and the block. One of the first Yoga Sutra's Yorana Cross is Yoga Chitti Vritti Nirodha. Yoga is the cessation of the fluctuations of consciousness. So Chitta is consciousness, and as we look to cultivate intelligence and wisdom in our practice, the intelligence of the body that we create in our practice is not book smarts. On your next inhalation, come up into your downward dog. Now, Mr. Iyengar goes on to translate in his later years in this Core of Yoga Sutras book, the Sthira Sukham Asanam. Whatever asana one performs, it should not distort the normal or original structure of the anatomical body. So you want basically to still have the organic sense of how you operate within your body as you try on different postures. So find the evenness of the reach of your heels, the stretch of your fingers, the turn of your arms, the lift of your chest. And when you tire in this pose where you can no longer sustain a sense of evenness, begin to find your way to stand. Each and every part of the joints and muscles must be kept in their natural shape and form. Each one of us must study the distortions that take place while performing the asanas and at once correct them. For this, the mind and intelligence must be made to involve and to observe by remaining in contact with each and every joint, muscle, bone, fiber, tendon, and cell, so that the attentive consciousness not only radiates focused awareness, but also tastes its flavor. This focused awareness must be felt by every particle of the body, from the skin to the core, from the core to the skin. This is the true meaning of Sthira Rata and Sukhata in the asanas. So this is a tall order, but organically speaking, as we begin to simply practice, reflect, correct, study over time, perhaps little things, little ways in which we do the asanas, it just all comes together, it integrates. And the breath is the best way to integrate these actions. So let us come into our standing portion briefly of the practice. And I'd like to bring in a chair for this and have a chair and two blocks. So depending on the height of your person, of your anatomical being, I should say, you may or may not need the blocks at the medium height or a taller height, but in essence, we're looking to manifest a Utkatasana-like leg, right? So I'm going to turn mine up a little higher because it doesn't necessarily, because this starts to feel more like my Utkatasana legs, right? So this is what we're looking for, is to feel ourselves with the buttock bones right on the edge of the block. The heels, when I reach for them, are grounded in the floor. When I don't reach for them, they're light. And the arms, when I reach back, can allow me this really nice extension up. So you want to feel as though you can ground the heels now and have your feet and knees and heels together. Now, immediately something's off. I could feel, I don't know if you can see this, but one block's in front of the other. It's further forward. So I hate to bring up this image, but it's like Princess and the Pea, right? That's the kind of nuance you want to notice in your poses, right? Because if your props are off, you're going to be off. If your hand or your chair is slightly off from center of the mat and the mat slightly off from the walls, it's all going to carry through. Right? So as you get a sense of evenness and how you're lifting your side ribs up, you should feel an even stretch in your arms. So that eventually, if you have one shoulder that's tighter than the other, it's going to open you up. Now, take your right hand up a little higher on the chair and bring the back of your left forearm to the outer right knee. And bend your right elbow up and begin to turn to the right. No churning in the lower back, just a sense of solidarity. And then exhale, come back, both hands to the chair. If you want a little bit more neck stretch, you just let your chin drop toward your sternum. And now take your left hand up a little higher on the back of the chair. Turn your right palm out, away from your midline, and take the back of your right hand to the outer left knee. And as you reach your hand down, press the back of your right hand into your left hand. Sternum lifts up, buttock goes down, navel back, and just lean away from the back of that chair. And then come back to center. I think, Claudia, how high are those blocks, Claudia? Is that medium height or are they at low? You could turn them down a little bit more. Yeah, because you almost look like you're standing. Yeah, it has to be proportional. Because when I'm fully standing in my Utkatasana, I'm pretty much like here, right? So I want to mimic whatever that is. And if I go down too low, it's just a funky looking thing. Now, let's come to stand. And then we're going to take the blocks and separate them and do a standing forward bend. Firm your thighs back, extend the sternum out, and lift the side channels up. So these lines in the side channel that correspond to 1.5 inches in from the hip point. Firm your thighs, ground the heels. As you exhale, bend the elbows and continue to lengthen out. So just go any amount down that your hamstrings can support. So if your head comes all the way down to the chair, let it. But again, what you want to do is cultivate a sense of support from the front body to the back body so that you even out the extension of your spine. Always have the elbows, the arms really bent so that your arms move away from the neck. So if your elbows are really bent, just move your hands to the legs of the chair. So Linda, you can leave your head on the chair, but just move, instead of having your hands here on the blocks, move them down. Good. On your next in-breath, slowly begin to come back up to halfway. Now, we're going into Utkatasana legs. So bend the legs and find that same position that you had before with the legs, right? So you have the stability of the blocks to guide you. Now take your right forearm behind your back and take the left forearm to the outer right knee. Now, as you come forward and down, just let your forearm come to the top of the thigh. Press down into your forearm, reach your chest out, and exhale, turn. Now, if you're someone who's been doing this for a while, you may want to go a little further, which is you take the outer elbow to the outer knee, so a little deeper, and then bring your palms together and press down into the left palm to turn even more. Reach the left ribs out from your left hip. Keep the hips square. This is Parivrita Utkatasana. And then inhale, sweep your arms up, Utkatasana. Bring the hands to the block. Straighten the legs, Uttanasana. And pause. Slowly lower yourself down into your Uttanasana again for a rest. Active rest, so the legs are active, the chest is lengthening, some action there. On your next inhalation, slowly bring yourself back up. Hands are on the blocks. Exhale, bend your legs, Utkatasana. Take your left forearm behind your back. Take your right palm, face it away from your midline. So you have your outer right forearm on the outer right knee. Reach to the sternum, exhale, turn, reaching the left elbow up, pressing the right forearm into the left leg. Now, if you want to go further, you bend your right elbow, setting the forearm down onto the thighs. You're turning, outer left hip draws back. Now, if you want to go deeper, you take your outer right elbow to the outer left knee, palms together, press down into the palm to turn one. Exhale, sweep your arms up, Utkatasana. Hands to the blocks, Uttanasana. And then exhale, back into your restful Uttanasana. Slowly bring your chest and your hands back up. And bring your hands to your hips and come to stand. So next what we're going to do is come into a very luxurious chair shavasana. So what you will need is 2 blankets, a belt, and a block. Okay. 1 blanket is going to be used for weight. And if you have a bolster at home, you can use your bolster for weight. So that's going to be off to the side for your belly. The belt is going to be looped just big enough so you can slip it over your legs. And so I'm just going to make it super big. That's here. So if you have 2 blankets and a bolster, which I can demonstrate. So the belt and the block go together. The bolster's for your belly. And if you have 3 blankets, 2 blankets, you can put 1 over the seat of the chair. And you can use 1 as a neck roll if you have tight shoulders, or you need extra support for your head, or you can leave 1 for your lower back. All right. So Claire, probably what I would say is you can use 1 for your lower back. You already have a padded chair. So you don't need 1 for your chair if you have a padded chair. And you could use another one just rolled up for your neck if you have the other blanket, or use it for weight on your abdomen. Oh, perfect. Bolster, good. Okay. So we come down into the chair. And when you come into the chair, you want your whole calf to be supported. So the good news is the blanket, if your thighs aren't quite that long, it'll lift you up high enough so you hook the meat of your calf onto the chair. Now, if I lie down, my blanket's not in the right place. Right? It's just not in the right place. So I'm going to move the blanket underneath the back of my hips. sure you got everything reachable. Once you start doing the block and the belt, you're timed out. I'm going to make everything a little closer so you can see some of the nuance. So hold that thought. You can go ahead and get yourself squared away with your chair and your blanket underneath the back of the pelvis. Now, so the next part is you want to put the loop over your thighs. The block goes in between the legs. And you're going to basically, if you have longer thighs and you can do this without it creating compression on the knee joint, that's also good too. Because essentially by binding the block in between your thighs, what you're doing is you're creating space, you're spreading the floor of the pelvis apart. And that'll give you a little bit more space in your SI joint. So basically it looks like this, right? So you can see my knee joint is not getting any pressure. It's just spreading the thigh bones apart. And then, so I have the blanket from my waist through the back of the pelvis. The calves are being lifted, so I feel a lift in the thigh bones. And then the bolster comes in at the angle of the thighs and presses the hip points down. I don't want to feel like my abdomen is being pushed up into my diaphragm. I just want to feel like I'm being drawn down. So here is your chair Shavasana. And see, that's the problem, is if your block is like sticking forward too much, I think, Claudia, if you can somehow get it to push back a little further, maybe yeah, and then your bolster won't like tip so much. Or if you have to, you can always take the bolster laterally, left to right. Is that easier? Yeah, that fits better, yeah. So you really want the weight to just be across the lower abdomen as close to the legs and the hip points as possible. Yeah, anything works, even if it's just an additional blanket. Relax your jaw, release your tongue. Let your tongue be thick in the back of your throat. Notice how the body is meeting the surface beneath it. The blanket, the floor. Is there any minor adjustments that need to be made so that you feel as though it's evenly resting? Let that balance transfer throughout the body. a nice deep breath in and out. Slowly move the props on your abdomen off to the side. Loosen the belt to take the block away. Draw your knees towards your chest and roll to your side, releasing the belt from your legs. Using your arms, press into the floor and come to sit. Lift and open your chest, palms together. As you exhale, bow your head from the nape of the neck. Namaste. Have a wonderful day. Enjoy the sun.
Thank you, Lisa.